Hi everyone. I'm Kief, and I think I'm going to introduce myself a bit by giving a little bit of background on my infrastructure automation journey. And I've been working with infrastructure for a while now, and it was probably around 10, 15 years ago I discovered this site called infrastructures.org. Does anyone know this site? Is anyone familiar with it? It's okay, a couple people. It's really, really old, so if you go and look at it, the last update was like 8 years ago. It doesn't mention cloud or virtualization or anything like that, but it did turn me on to this whole idea. It talks about this idea of using automation tools to automatically build and be able to kind of repeatably build servers and stuff like that. And turned me on to CF Engine. What about CF Engine? How many people know CF Engine? Okay, that's good. That's good. You should know CF Engine. It's the grandfather of server configuration management. So it turned me on to that, and FAI, which I could use to kind of rack servers and automatically have them installed and the operating system configured and all that stuff. And that was really cool. And so I spent some number of years at a series of companies which you've never heard of, and kind of learning, so going to kind of, talks and reading stuff and discovering new things like Puppet and Chef and messing around with VMware and AWS and all that kind of stuff, and this was really cool. But about 5 years ago, I joined ThoughtWorks, and what I got to do there was to go out to a lot of different companies and see what they're doing. So I was going out with development teams, and we basically are, helping the companies kind of build software. And so I'm working with different kinds of operations teams, infrastructure teams. And the thing I discovered is that pretty much everywhere, so all these kind of technologies and tools are becoming really mainstream. They're really, everybody, it's very rare to show up somewhere where they're not using at least VMware, experimenting with, doing some kind of experimentation with public cloud. Pretty much everybody's got Puppet or Chef. So all this stuff is, it's arrived, right? But the thing that's kind of, I guess, disappointing or frustrating or whatever is that the way people are using it isn't really in the way that you read about the kind of more advanced companies, the Netflixes and so ons of the world, or even a lot of smaller companies and places I've worked. They're not kind of getting that full. They're kind of using them in some of the same ways that people have always managed their infrastructure, kind of not changing their habits. It goes back to what Andrew was saying this morning around the principles and practices and tools. People are adopting the tools, some of the practices, but not necessarily getting the principles. And so this is where I got, Marco keeps telling me to plug the book. So I'm working on a book for O'Reilly, which will be out sometime. It's basically trying to present kind of the kind of principles and practices of this infrastructure as code idea, in the hopes that more people will kind of get turned on to it and see some benefit from it. So that's where I'm coming from, and use the clicker. What I want to talk about today is why to automate it, right? So what are good reasons? Why should we automate our infrastructure? What do we get from it? Yeah. It's dumb to do it otherwise. I think. So I think what tends to happen is, as techies, we get involved in the tools, and we take that kind of we're interested in solutions. And we know there are lots of benefits. You get you can scale, you can get kind of reliability, and lots of good things can come out of it. But I think we kind of assume that it's just going to naturally fall out, right? Set this stuff up and start using it, and benefits will follow. Which I think is true to an extent, but I think one of the things that I've run into is where if you're not kind of explicit about the outcomes that you're expecting to get out of it, you may not get those particular outcomes. And I think as well, you get when you get kind of management and people, executive level people who are investing money to set these things up, they have expectations which might be quite different. It might not be things which you can maybe you can't realistically achieve them, or maybe you're just, you need to do things differently in order to achieve them. So to talk a bit more about why it's important to think about what outcomes you want. I'm going to go back to the 1980s and to the automobile industry. So back in those days, the market for automobiles shifted quite dramatically, and people were interested in smaller and cheaper and more fuel-efficient cars than they had been in the American automobile industry, the manufacturers were in a really bad way. And the Japanese manufacturers were going gangbusters. They were really meeting these needs. And they were really doing quite well. And they were going to take over the world, and everyone was scared. So people from the American automakers went out to Japan to see, what are they doing? That's why is it they're kicking our ass? What are their secrets? And so they saw this. They saw they've got these automated factories and assembly lines, and so a lot of different things came out of those days, or a lot of kind of fads, kind of small level stuff, so things like quality, all these kind of individual things, quality circles and just-in-time manufacturing, all that stuff was very, very hip, but people didn't kind of put it together into the big picture. They focused on the individual things. So the big American companies went out and spent billions and billions of dollars to imitate this, to build automation of their assembly lines. And the outcome they got was not good. There was a recession in the early 90s, and they ended up with large masses of inventory of unsold cars that they couldn't shift, and it hurt them quite badly. And I think the lessons to learn from this, I think we can see the parallels to kind of IT and infrastructure automation today. Lessons we can learn from this is that if you automate for the wrong reasons, it can make you very sad. So these automobile manufacturers spent a lot of money that didn't get them the actual value. And I've seen this, for example, with, so I was at a client a few years ago where we were building infrastructure for them. They didn't have an infrastructure and operations department, but they wanted to kind of build some software and do stuff in-house. And so we're like, we talked about, oh yeah, we can build, all this automation stuff in cloud. It's really cool. And so they're like, yeah, we want that, okay. And so we went out and we built Rackspace Cloud and Chef and all this kind of stuff, really, really groovy stuff. And then kind of, as we're going along with this project, we kept telling them, well, you need to kind of bring on some staff who are going to run this going forwards, because we're going to be done, we're going to go away, and somebody else, you need to have people who know how to run this stuff. And it took a while, and the penny dropped when they started kind of talking about the kinds of people they were going to bring, or that they were bringing in to do this, were people who had never really seen a Linux command line. And so what hit us was that their expectations for the automation was quite different. They were really thinking of it as, I'm going to get this push-button thing that doesn't take much skill to operate, and it's just kind of run itself, and maybe like a little gauge, and somebody goes and pokes it, if the gauge goes into the red or whatever. But and it helped us to, it took us we were a little slow to realize this, but it helped having this understanding, because we could look at, first of all, kind of adjusting their expectations, but also adjusting how we're implementing things. So at the time we discovered this, we were building this monitoring solution on graphite and lots of kind of hand-build stuff. It was this really complicated thing that we were finding really complicated to build, and we realized this is just not the right solution for these guys. So we went and instead started bringing in more kind of hosted services to bring into things. So I think in that case we used Datadog for monitoring instead of graphite. And so it's just kind of a matter of aligning what we're building to suit the needs of the what the outcomes people are trying to get out of it. So I think one of the other lessons is that it's not strictly about the tools, right? It's you have to think about, if you have particular outcomes you want, like I want to have maybe less skilled staff, or I want to have more reliability, or whatever it may be, you're going to need to do other things. So to go back to the example of the automobile manufacturers, what the Japanese were doing with their automation, and Toyota in particular, it wasn't trying to reduce staff costs, and that's what the Americans took away was, oh, look at that assembly line, there's no people there, we can have just a few people and cut our workforce and we'll save loads of money. But what the Japanese weren't focusing on that. They were, Toyota in particular, they were focused on lead times. They were saying, we don't want to have big inventories of cars, we want to be able to have a really short time between a customer saying the particular options I want on my car, and then getting them that specific car. So they used automation, and they implemented their automation so that each car coming off the assembly line could be different from the one before. It could have different options. And then as kind of market's needs changed, they could also adapt quite quickly their tooling to keep up with it. And so they could have, they didn't have to have big inventories, and so they didn't get hurt, as badly during those recessions. So that's just that example of that you have to do things outside. And it's interesting that today we focus on lean, and we look at Toyota as the kind of the poster child of all, we want to kind of imitate what they've done and bring that to software development. But when we talk about those things, and you read those books about Toyota's processes, they pretty much never mention automation. Automation is not the point. It's not the main thing. It's something that they use in service of a different goal, basically. And in terms of expectations, so I started out, I was going to have like a list of, oh, here's things that people think they're going to get out of automation, like I'm going to cut my staff and have people who are very little training and all that kind of thing. And I realized what a lot of it boils down to is this kind of fear of the technology. It's this technology projects to implement these kind of things are scary, rightfully so. They tend to be very expensive. People without a strong technology background or kind of distant in the past technology background they don't necessarily have enough understanding to really know what's going on. So there's a lot of kind of trust stuff issues going on there, and they're really hoping that they can just get something that just works out of the box and they don't have to worry about. And so I think one of the things we have to remember, we have to emphasize, is that you do need a good technical understanding if you're going to get outcomes out of the technology. So yes, you can outsource parts of things. So most companies just don't need to build a data center and don't even need to worry about racking servers and all that kind of stuff. But you kind of still need to have enough knowledge of what's going on there if you want to be successful with it. So this phrase, software is eating the world, this was Mark Andreessen a few years back wrote a piece about this. He got quite a lot last week at the GoTo conference. And basically, if you look at software, if you look at most organizations, say 10, 15, 20 years ago, they may have had technology, but it was all very individual. So like your HR department might have had an access database to keep track of people and things. But nowadays, it's pervasive. Everything has to talk to each other within the organization, to other organizations. It's spreading out into, it's got to be on our phones, got to be on our watch. How many people have a smartwatch of some kind? A fair number in a crowd like this. And so our IT systems that we manage have to integrate with all of this stuff. And the reason I put this picture up here, this is a project we did up north last year or so for Silent Herdsman. And this is a little wearable thing that the cow is wearing that has a wireless connection back to the home base, sends data back, it goes up onto AWS and gets crunched, and they can project things. They look at things like the health of the cows and when they get pregnant and all that kind of stuff, and they can project what their kind of milk yields are going to be and all that sort of stuff. But it's just the fact that our IT systems now have to integrate with stuff like this, and it's changing. I mean, there's always new stuff coming out. We don't even know how. We haven't found if there's going to be killer apps for the watches and stuff like that. So we can't expect to build a system and be done with it and just kind of keep it running. It's going to be constantly changing. So I'd like to talk about the Iron Age of IT versus the Cloud era, and I realize this is Stone Age, not Iron Age, but it's kind of more dramatic. So basically, and with the kind of Iron Age, it's basically the idea that using physical hardware. It's based on the idea that when we need to get a server or build an environment, it involves purchasing hardware and putting it in a data center, racking it up, and a lot of work. And so what this means is, if you get it wrong, it's expensive. All right. So if you have to go back and say, "Oh, actually, I need a SAN device, and we have to spend more money on that and wait for it to come and all that," and so there's a big emphasis on getting it right up front, the big upfront design, and then over-specifying, so making really complex solutions. But well before you get into production, you have to say, all of the kind of caching and everything that you might possibly need to maybe handle some theoretical aspect of your system, put it in just to be sure, so you don't have to go back and ask for more, and so you get the kind of really overly complicated solutions. And all the process around doing things is kind of change phobic. I mean, a change means you've screwed something up, and so you have change management, change control, change advisory boards that have to analyze, okay, so why are you asking for this change now? What did you do wrong to, originally? How can we avoid making similar mistakes in the future? And do you really need that change, or something else we could do that might be less optimal, but at least it will avoid us having to kind of do something, expensive or delay the project or whatever. Versus the cloud era, where change represents learning, right? So the point is that when you're doing things with a more dynamic infrastructure, and where you can make changes by changing a configuration file or clicking on a UI, the cost of change becomes quite low, and it becomes much easier to say, let's build the simplest thing we can, implement that, try it out, see how it goes, and then as we discover and learn what we really need, we can add those things in bit by bit and make a much simpler and cleaner solution. I think, and the problem we run into is that we haven't fully made the shift to this way of thinking. So we still have a lot of the process and thinking from the Iron Age that we're still trying to apply with the cloud. So in a large organization that is implemented, they've set up OpenStack, and we've got our private cloud, and they're very proud. Okay, how do we create a server? I can go to this portal, click here, and it creates a server, and within minutes you've got a server. That's awesome, great. How do I log in? Oh, you can't log in. You're going to have to raise a request to have accounts created on it. Okay, how do I raise a request? Well, you can't raise a request yet because it hasn't been, we need to wait for the overnight batch job to run that will add the server into the CMDB, so you can start adding the requests to add accounts, and once you have the accounts, you can have another request to install the JVM on it or whatever kind of packages you need to be able to do stuff. So it takes like a week or more to be able to get to actually use that server. And then if you need another server like it, you have to go through the same process. All right, it's not repeatable. So to me, like the biggest kind of meta reason to automate is for this process of change. And I think, so we talk about making changes fast, cheap, and safe by using automation. And in some senses, that seems like, well, it's obvious. Yeah, we'll set up the automation and we'll get this for free or for the cost of setting it up. But again, if you're not focused on this is what we're after, you're not going to get that. So you're going to set up those tools in the same organization that had that private cloud I was talking about. They've also got kind of Chef and various things around that if they put it all together, it could be quite nice and could make the experience of setting up and managing infrastructure very easy and very painless. But that's not their focus. So the automation fear, we've seen this before, haven't we? The fear, okay. So what I've seen happen very often is organizations, and I did this myself actually, to be fair, when I started out with probably the CF engine, certainly with Puppet, I remember doing this. So I use it in a very kind of interactive way, right? So I have some web servers and I want to make a configuration change, I'll write my little Puppet manifest and then push it out and apply it. And then I leave it, and then later on I'll make another kind of change. And I kind of do this in different subsets of servers. And the thing is, these tools are designed to be run continuously, right? The idea is that you're going to set this up, and it's just going to run and run and run. You make your configuration changes to your cookbooks, to your manifests, or what have you, and they just get automatically applied to the right servers. But if you're doing things in a more ad hoc way, you end up being afraid to do it because it breaks, right? So you make a change, and you push it out to a bunch of servers, and things break because you made an incompatible change here than what you made there. And so that kind of reinforces this thing of, we can't kind of trust, we can't have it run automatically and just let it go because stuff's going to break. And because it runs in the cycle, we don't know, it could take up to an hour or however long before it breaks, and then how long before we discover that it breaks. And so can't trust our automation. And so the kind of way around this is, it's around kind of discipline. It's around building good habits and having good hygiene around your infrastructure and your automation of it. So it starts small with a very simple change that you're going to kind of push through. And going back to that thing about the change being the purpose of the automation, the first thing you should be automating is that process of applying a change, even if it's a simple change. So putting in a little bit of kind of continuous integration style testing, test kitchen type stuff, and those sorts of tools. There's loads of tools out there now that I think we don't use enough as we should. But if you start out by saying just pick a couple, pick a tool or so, and make it work for a simple change that's less important, and get that kind of pipeline going to where you can push changes out, test them out on a test environment before you push them to important environments, and then you can kind of build up your confidence and put more and more things into that system. And I really advocate doing things in that way, the kind of tracer bullet pipeline or trailblazer, rather than the approach of oh no. I think I'll postpone that for now.
Third ball.
I was wondering what you're laughing at. I wasn't saying anything funny. Yeah, it's the idea of start small and start getting simple changes through so you can kind of build up on that rather than doing a big bang. I'm going to build, I'm going to write cookbooks or manifests that cover everything I need, and then we'll think about how to we'll add testing later and all that kind of stuff. You have to build that stuff in from the beginning or you're never going to have that confidence. And the test, so there's the testing and the monitoring and all that kind of stuff that you have a pretty high level of confidence that when you make a change, you're going to catch it, ideally before it gets to an important system, or certainly that you'll catch it quickly and be able to use your system to fix it quickly so you have that mean time to recovery being the really important thing. So yes, again, Marcus had plugged the book. So the intent of the book is really kind of focused on the stuff that I just talked about, really around those principles and practice, how to get to that place where I've kind of talked about it at a very kind of hand-wavy level. The book will hopefully have more detail. Another big reason, another existential reason, I think, to automate is around empowering people. And this is something that really I know doesn't get focused. In most organizations, this is not a priority. So how many people are familiar with Anti-Fragile? That's an idea. Good number of people. That's cool. So for those who aren't, in a real nutshell, kind of way, the idea is that you have, we've talked about robust systems, right? You have fragile systems, which if you put any kind of strain or stress onto them, they break easily. A robust system has traditionally been what we aim for, which is a system that holds up well when you put stress on it. An anti-fragile system is one, when you put stress on it, it improves, it gets stronger. So one of the examples from the book here, from Taleb's book, is around the human body and like muscles. What is exercise? Exercise is basically putting stress and strain on your muscles and essentially damaging them, and then they become stronger in response to that. So for IT systems, we'd like to have this, right? We would like to have our systems get stronger as bad things happen to them. And we can do that, not just in the way of that kind of having the monitoring system that automatically does remediation for you, but actually improve and remove root causes and all that. There's a secret ingredient to IT systems that can make them anti-fragile. Anyone guess what it is? Automation. No, it's not automation. Because automation won't improve itself, right? You need to improve the automation. And the way you do that is with people. So remember, people are a part of a system, right? So you need to think about the people are that kind of feedback loop of who notice when there's an issue and make the improvements to the system, to the automation, to resolve that and make the system overall stronger and better. There's also the people who are using the infrastructure and the services that we provide. And we talk a lot about self-service, and I've kind of started thinking about the difference between self-service and empowerment. And the analogy I'm thinking about is a candy machine, vending machine versus a kitchen. So you get, with self-service, it's kind of like here, you have a couple of things that you can choose from. As long as you want one of those things, it's fine, press the button and you get it. But if you need to go any deeper than that, then you can't, because it's just this kind of interface. So providing people with a kitchen, with ingredients and tools and what have you, so they can build stuff for themselves that fit what they need is much more powerful. And it's the only way to really, really scale this as you get to big organizations, having a team that will make something for you along with everybody else, and you get all those kind of cues, and it takes forever. You really have to kind of push things out. You push the work to the people who need it done and who know the best way to do it. So a few kind of thoughts on how to go about this. So I'm thinking in terms of a platform team or infrastructure team or what have you within an organization. Some of the kind of patterns or anti-patterns I see is this idea that we will build this thing that will do what people need. So somebody, there's an identifying need. We have a lot of development teams. They need to deploy software. So we're going to go away and build the solution that's going to deploy, let them deploy software. And then they come back with something which may or may not actually meet the needs of the people who want to use it. So I think the key is to implement any of these platform type things, any of these kind of services, infrastructure, what have you, with the people who are actually going to use it. Pick a project and work with them to build something that suits their needs, and then worry about platformizing it and making it reusable across teams as you go along and have more teams come on board, rather than going away and coming up with the perfect thing on your own. And then a similar kind of concept is to make platforms out of simple pieces rather than massive monstrosities that do everything that you might need done. So at another organization recently, we were using Jenkins and Stash to manage our code and produce things, push them to Nexus. We wanted to deploy some static web content, some just HTML and CSS onto the web server, and they said, great, you can use Blade Logic for that. And I was like, oh, that looks like a lot of tool to essentially do scopy, right? Can I just kind of run, I've got a Linux server here, Linux server there, I want to copy some files. Can I just use scopy for that? Oh, but it gives you rollback and versioning and all this awesome stuff. It's like, I've already got that. I've already got, source control and Jenkins and all that. And I think the issue that people in this particular organization have, and a lot of organizations have, is that you get these different teams trying to provide things, and they all want to provide everything. They want their tool to be all singing, all dancing, doing everything that it might need to do. And so the simple pieces is the key thing here. It goes back to that Unix philosophy. It makes something small that does one thing and does it very well, and then allow the people who need to use those tools to select and put them together on their own without needing a lot of hand-holding, which goes to letting the customers customize what they need, pick and choose the pieces. So one of the things I mentioned before, the kind of chain of tools that over time have come in, server automation and virtualization and cloud. And now I'm seeing a lot more of kind of the platform as a service and private cloud type things coming in, which I think has the potential to be awesome. But what happens a lot of the times is that it's given as kind of this black box. You must use it this way. We provided it this way. To me, the most successful paths is AWS. Because they provide you with all these different pieces, and they're, okay, here's one solution. You use Beanstalk to deploy your application. You can pick your databases, your monitoring, these kind of things. You can pick other things outside of that ecosystem if you want to, but they're not trying to impose this one winner-take-all solution. So just the last bit here, I want to talk a little bit about how to focus. So we talked about outcomes, and so I do spend a fair bit of time talking to the kind of managers who are looking to implement these change programs and so on. And it's useful to talk about those outcomes and make sure everybody understands what they're expecting to get out of things, and how do you measure it is a question that comes up. I think lead time is really important. And we talk a lot about, in the kind of continuous delivery in DevOps, we talk about how long does it take you to deploy a single line of code. And I think that's a great thing to talk about, and it's really useful, but it's really limited. There are a lot more things that we do, and we need to think about how to be able to speed all of those up. So if you look at things like doing a value stream mapping for various activities and see what's all involved in there, and how can you, as a platform team or an operations team, how can you remove yourself from that and offer people the ability to kind of do those things themselves, that becomes really powerful. And so just a few examples, going back to that Iron Age versus Cloud era. And it's night and day, right? You go to different organizations, and there's some that are very clearly in this way. How long does it take to fully provision a new server? Days, weeks. It's not uncommon for it to be a couple of months. How if I want to build a whole new environment? What if it's even if it's exactly the same as an existing environment, or if it's new, it doesn't kind of matter. What if I want to reconfigure an environment? What if I want to change the amount of RAM or so on? And a lot of organizations, that is a long process. You need to kind of create forms and designs and get various people to look at it and see whether you should be allowed to do that. And if you've got the kind of right technology, and not just the right technology, but if you implement it with this mindset, you can get this down to minutes. So the organizations that people are in, how many feel like they're kind of in this category? They haven't quite made it to here. It takes them quite a while to kind of do stuff like this. Fair number. How many people feel like they're over here? More, which is, I guess, why you're here. Okay, that's pretty much what I've got. Thanks. Oh, I should mention the book is, so it's not finally out, but there is essentially a rough draft available from O'Reilly's shop. So you can buy it and kind of see where I've got to it and how, and this is the opportunity basically. I'm really keen actually for people to have a look at it and tell me what's wrong with it, what can be improved, what's confusing, what am I missing, because this is I still have a chance to fix those things. So thanks.
We've got time for a few questions, if any. So when is the book coming out? Because I read the draft last year.
It's a secret, including to me.
Okay, so thank you again.
Thanks.